Hello and welcome to Insurance Business TV for our fourth Cyber Power Panel. We're going to focus on the cyber challenges facing SMEs. We've assembled our experts. Damien Shade is Client Director of Professional and Financial Risks at Lockton. Declan Thompson is a commercial broker with GSI Insurance Partners. And John O'Sue is Head of Cyber New Zealand for Marsh. All our guests are in Auckland. Nice to see all you guys again. Welcome back to the panel, our fourth and final of the year. We're quite often seeing these reports these days about how the frequency of attacks on SMEs are going up, particularly quite recently. I'm just wondering if you're seeing that too, and reflected in the claims you're getting as well. Damien, can we start with you on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Danny. Nice to be here again with you. Yeah, absolutely. We're certainly seeing a continued influx of claims, and I think particularly through social engineering, which we always seem to come back to, that remains prevalent at the moment. We're seeing the threat actors, they're just getting more sophisticated with their targeting, and using obviously AI to pursue a wider range of targets. So they cast their net wider and they're having a lot more success. So I think we're seeing a frequency of claims because of that, and that's certainly one of the areas where clients are having the most concerns and the most issues from a claims perspective.
Can I push you, Damien, and ask you? I mean, how much are these attacks going up on SMEs? Do you think? I mean, what is there? Can you put a figure on it?
Yes, some of the numbers that we've seen coming out have been quite significant. We're seeing sort of, I think there were figures came out of from around about 60% from government agencies around the number of SMEs that have been targeted, and generally phishing and social engineering tends to be the major cause of these claims. So I think that's the area that's predominantly going up more than anything else. And I think just because, as I said, there's a wider range of ability that these sort of actors have to attack SMEs, and they're just an easier target than sort of the bigger corporates.
And Declan, moving on to you, what's your claim situation? And are you seeing them going up?
Yeah, I would say so as well. Thanks again for having us, Danny. I would say from our experience as well, we definitely are seeing claims still continue to be on the upward. I'd say severity of claims, or the severity of each individual claims, remain relatively stable, at least for the last 12 months or so. But we are seeing the frequency start to increase. I mean, even outside of the claims experience, talking with some of the SMEs at conferences and industry events and that kind of thing, there's a lot more conversation happening around. Or there's a lot more conversation around a lot more businesses having experienced some form of cyber event, whether it's phishing or social engineering, this email compromise, those kinds of situations. So yeah, I would say the frequency is definitely still on the upward trend. It's I would say possibly, at least from our experience, yeah, the severity of these claims seems to be relatively stable, if not even decreasing.
And Damien saying 60% of SMEs report being targeted. And Declan, are you seeing that reflected in claims as well? Is there a way to put a figure on the claims numbers?
Oh, it'd be tough for us to put a figure on claims numbers, if I'm honest. But I would say that yeah, we definitely are seeing at least a good margin more in terms of cyber claims come through, our inboxes and that kind of thing than previously. So yeah, probably a bit tough for me to put a percentage on it, unfortunately. But yeah, 60% wouldn't surprise me if somebody said that of our own claims experience.
And Jono, coming to you, definitely an uptick. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, big bit silly to go against the grain. It's definitely consistent. It's trending upwards. In terms of I guess the severity of the incidents as well. Things are taking a little while to recover from. I think it's just a lot more thoroughness that goes into actually dealing with these incidents. So I think there's definitely a lot more awareness. I think it's sort of it's always been a hot topic for us, but I think there's been a bit of a turning point really in the last 6 months, just in the business communities, and not just SMEs, but certainly across the board as well. And even to the larger levels, I think all the conversations in the business community is really consistent. That's really trickling upwards even to larger boards, and they're taking it really seriously too.
And Jono, let's stick with you because that gets into our next question, which is, it's one thing for there to be more awareness, but are SMEs actually showing more interest in buying covers from you at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. And that it's definitely a balance right now, especially with I guess economic and financial challenges and finding the extra bit of money on the balance sheet to buy a new policy. But it's certainly there's a lot of interest. A lot of clients are asking for quotes, and even if it is when they do get some compelling offers, they're definitely looking to buy these new policies for the first time. So definitely the awareness is there, and I think it's getting much easier to articulate the value of these cyber policies, and obviously with higher policies, we get with the higher policy count, we're going to get some higher claims counts going forward too.
And Damien, you're seeing more interest manifest itself, if you like, in non-contingent BI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think clients, or SMEs in particular, are raising concerns. So everyone talks about having a managed service provider that manages sort of aspects of their technology, but insurers at the moment are providing, well, a number of insurers are providing non-contingent BI. So basically, if there's a cyber event that's not related to any of your particular vendors or service providers, and that cyber event impacts you and your ability to sort of trade, there's coverage available from a business interruption point of view, which is a little bit of a unique selling point, particularly for those SMEs that have sort of a heavy reliance, maybe not on a managed service provider, but on another platform or another provider. So it's something that you kind of, as you see more claims evolve, you just see more interest in that, and you kind of start to see the light bulbs go off. But yeah, I agree with Jono's sort of point. It's that constant theme with SMEs in our discussions. Everyone's understands that there's issues out there, understands there's threats and there's cyber threats, but still that little bit of a dynamic that it's not going to happen to me. So it's kind of trying to continue to bridge that. But we are seeing certainly some more interesting questions, and yeah, the non-contingent BI is a really, really interesting coverage point that we sort of use as discussion point to start those kind of discussions with clients.
Declan, what about you?
Yeah, I guess this probably follows on quite well from what Damien was saying. But I think like one of the things that I found really interesting over the last 12 months or so is that as brokers, we're probably spending less time explaining what cyber insurance is and more time discussing with clients around limits, coverage options, some of the possibles ins and outs and extensions and that kind of thing, or of the policy, as opposed to, hey, this is why you need cyber insurance. And it's a much better place to be in the broking world, I think, when clients are aware of the risks. I think we're probably just starting to see a lot more maybe supply chain and contractual pressures in terms of cyber insurance. Like we've got a lot more clients now being asked for, council contracts or government contracts and that kind of thing to have or to hold a certain limit of cyber cover, which is again a good thing to see. So I think that's probably starting to raise some awareness, and there's some driving forces behind that as well.
And Declan, sticking with you, one thing that's going to impact this increasing awareness and the councils pushing for it in contracts and everybody else is the rates themselves. What do you see cyber rates doing in the months ahead, and why?
I would expect that cyber rates will stay relatively stable in the next at least 3 months or so. I don't see any reason that we'd see any significant increases or significant decreases. I mean, insurers are still being selective with the risks, and you might see some increases for less favorable risks, and relatively stable premiums, if not some slight decreases probably for businesses that position themselves well in terms of cyber risk management. So.
Okay. And Jono, you see flattening in the months ahead?
Yeah, certainly so. And I guess we've been predicting that for probably the last 18 months. I think it's going to flatten and it continue to keep dropping. But I think, speaking to some of the UK markets, especially waiting for those reinsurance contracts to come through in January, that's usually a bit of a tell as to where things will go in 2026. Even if it does trend upwards or flatten, we're likely not to see a sharp correction that we saw in 2021. And I think there's enough, premium in the market to make it sustainable. And by and large, the markets aren't doing too many silly things. So I think we're looking at a pretty healthy market going forward.
Damien, what do you see the rates doing?
Yeah, look, I agree with the boys on that one. I think we've still got so much competition and capacity available that the rates are sort of relatively consistent. So there's press around. Obviously, I've read in Insurance Times, and there's sort of information coming out of London that everyone's talking the market's going to be pushing up. But just with the level of competition and sort of, I guess, from a claims perspective, particularly at that higher end, without those significantly claims with a lot of quantum in them, we will continue to see the market sort of flat. But yeah, I mean, it's something that's going to evolve, and any kind of market, I think it's going to be a steady, flat transitioning to an increase. So I think that's what we can kind of expect to see over a little while. You're never going to get sort of a significant increase when you've got this many markets in place. So I think we'll see it gradually over the next 6 to 12 months.
And Damien, sticking with you, do you still feel confidence about the way cyber insurers can adapt to all these attacks coming in? I mean, what's your biggest worry in terms of cyber attacks right now?
My biggest worry, it's a very good question, actually. I think my worry is probably different to others. I always have the concern of a sort of a major event or a major outage that affects one of the big boys. You're talking about, there was a recent Microsoft SharePoint vulnerability, or I think about sort of an Amazon or an Oracle, and the number of sort of clients and customers and the amount of data that they look after and retain. Like, I imagine an event that impacts them that has such a widespread impact on everyone. That's what my biggest concern would be from a cyber perspective, as opposed to sort of the claims that impact individuals, because I think that's sort of a widespread issue, and everyone sort of seems to think that they're all invincible, but we kind of know from experience that it doesn't take much for a little bit of a chink in that armor of invincibility. So that's probably my biggest concern, is sort of a day zero issue, or kind of a really big issue facing one of those major vendors or major providers that impacts everybody.
And Declan, for you, it's AI.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that Damien's point on a large scale event is definitely like a large worry. But another piece that I sort of see being a worry of mine is just the growing, I guess, sophistication of some of these AI models, and how some of these threat actors and things are using AI to kind of mass approach and mass penetrate a number of SMEs. So I know that there's like a training piece that we can sort of reiterate to clients around cyber risk management and that kind of thing, but I expect that it's going to be actually difficult to keep up with the ease of which some of these cyber actors and things now can use these models. So I think AI possibly is going to be a larger problem in the next, say, 12 to 24 months. I've got no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if so.
And Jono, what's keeping you awake at night?
Maybe we'll just mix the two together, and you've got a pretty crazy problem, right? You've got AI, which is obviously developing at a rate of knots, and cyber criminals using different ways of getting in, and then you've got the big aggregated risk, which I think the markets have been really hedging for the last 4 or 5 years. So I think, to me, it is an outage of one of those major providers, and whether it's AI enabled attack by cyber criminals that there hasn't been sort of foreseen. I think we've seen the last 12 months when the likes of CrowdStrike and AWS has gone down even for 24, 48 hours. Those are programming errors, and those were fixed relatively quickly. But can you imagine if it's actually something which is malicious and much harder to come back from? And I think that is the stuff where, from the cyber insurance market, I think they've been hedging for something like that for a while. The biggest analogy I use, it's a digital earthquake, and we're all, I guess, waiting for it to happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But the day it does, it'll be really, really interesting to see the ramifications of that. And I think we'll all be dealing with the fallout in different ways.
On that worrying thought, Jono, thank you very much. And thanks also, Declan and Damien. And that wraps up our New Zealand Cyber Panel. Thanks for watching Insurance Business TV. Bye for now.